My husband asked me to go to the restaurant with him for a business talk. At the dining table, the client always flirts with me. He even rubs my leg with his foot. I really can't stand it. I want to get up and leave, but my husband firmly stopped me. Olivia, immediately sit back down. It's your fortune that Mr. Daniel has taken an interest in you. Don't be ungrateful. I was taken aback for a moment. Then I looked at him coldly. Nathan, did you call me here just to accompany your client? Yeah. We are adults now. Have a drink. Isn't it normal for something to happen? You're just a decoration. What's the harm in paying a small price? Nathan was halfway through his sentence. Suddenly smiled at me. His smile carried a hint of pride. He said, "You should feel lucky that Mr. Daniel has taken a liking to you. Otherwise, for you, it's not good for the company. It's completely useless." I stared at him in a bit of a daze. My eyes were filled with confusion. Nathan, do you even know what you're talking about? I'm your wife. You actually want me to use my looks to please your client. I said this while pointing to the client beside me who was staring at me with ill intent. This Mr. Daniel weighs at least 200 pounds. You want me to accompany him. I'd rather die. As soon as I finished speaking, Daniel immediately slammed the table and stood up. Who are you calling fat? I spend over 10 million a year on weight loss. I look just like a guy in his 20s. I struggled to suppress my discomfort. I only glanced at him out of the corner of my eye. Mr. Daniel, I think for you, the best weight loss method is to hurry home and look in the mirror. After hearing what I said, Nathan immediately got angry. He stood up and pointed at my nose, shouting, "You have some nerve. How dare you disrespect Mr. Daniel? This is simply asking for trouble. Olivia, I command you to apologize to Mr. Daniel immediately. Do you understand?" I looked at him coldly. A hint of sarcasm appeared at the corner of my mouth. Why should I apologize to him? It's clearly you who should be apologizing. Actually, I found it a bit strange before coming here. Usually, Nathan doesn't even let me go to the office. This time, however, he actively asked me to accompany him to meet a client. I never expected that. He actually wants me to use my looks to gain benefits. Thinking of this, the anger in my heart surged uncontrollably. But Nathan seems unaware of the seriousness of the situation. He keeps pestering me. Olivia, let me make this clear. If you dare step out of this door, you won't need to come to the office tomorrow. I never expected Nathan would use his position to threaten me. After all, he could hold the chairman position all because I helped him from behind. I had just turned 18 that year. Nathan's father, Edward, came to my house with a marriage proposal. He specifically traveled from afar to ask me to marry his son. I was still young back then. I knew nothing about love. Without much thought, I agreed. But who would have thought? After so many years of marriage, Nathan has never touched me. Yet today, he suddenly had relations with someone else. Am I just an item to be exchanged for him? Hearing you say that, are you trying to fire me? Nathan looked at me with a smug expression. Yes, if you don't help me properly entertain Mr. Daniel today, I will have HR fire you tomorrow. I suppressed my inner anger and stared at her intently. What if I refuse? As soon as I finished speaking, Daniel's expression immediately darkened. Miss Olivia, I heard you're the little white flower raised by the Nathan family, he said while talking, looking at me with a disdainful gaze. I think that some people are only suitable for show, but when it comes to doing business, that's not enough. I just want you to play with me. You actually don't give me face. If this gets out, where will I, Daniel, put my face? After hearing what he said, I couldn't help but laugh. Mr. Daniel, you might as well give up on this idea early. It's impossible for me to accompany you in this lifetime. About the contract, if you want to sign, then sign. If you don't want to, then forget it. After all, it's just over 100 million. It's nothing to me. I originally wanted to persuade you properly, and also remind Nathan. I can still come up with that amount of money. I didn't expect such a simple sentence. Nathan suddenly got anxious. Olivia, have you lost your mind? You know what 100 million means for the company. If we can successfully sign this contract with Mr. Daniel, there will be an opportunity to apply for listing by the end of the year. I raised my head. I looked at him calmly. The matter of going public. It's actually not as difficult as you think. Give me 2 minutes. I can make a phone call and resolve it immediately. I just took out my phone. Nathan snatched it away. He said angrily, "Enough. Olivia, do you know how long I've tolerated you? It's one thing for you to be irresponsible usually. Now that someone finally takes an interest in you, what's the big deal about spending one night with Mr. Daniel? Maybe you'll get some pocket money from him tonight." After hearing Nathan's words, I was completely stunned. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. The man standing in front of me has always wanted to push me away. Is he really my husband? I couldn't hold it in any longer. I can't hold it in anymore. He shouted at him loudly. Nathan, I hope you can be more clear-headed. I am your wife, however, even so. Nathan still doesn't think he's done anything wrong. Honey, how could you even say that? Olivia, ask yourself. Do we really have feelings for each other? To me, you are like a commodity, something that can be replaced at any time. As he said that, his tone suddenly changed. His gaze became sharp. If you must be concerned about status, I can divorce you right now. I slowly raised my head, staring at this man who is both familiar and unfamiliar to me. My heart was filled with disappointment. My husband, in order to please a client, wants me to accompany someone else. This is completely beyond my imagination. I struggled to control the anger within me. Clenching my teeth, I stared at him. Nathan, this is my final warning to you. I disagree. It was during my argument with Nathan. Daniel was already starting to get impatient. He frowned. He looked at me with disdain. You know what the consequences of refusing me will be? I let out a cold laugh. I stared into her eyes. Oh, Mr. Daniel, are you trying to scare me? I have lived this long, and I have never been threatened by anyone. You are the first. I said to him with a smile, Mr. Daniel, if I don't agree, what do you plan to do? As soon as Daniel heard this, his face turned bright red instantly. His voice even trembled a bit. Miss Olivia, have I been too polite to you? If it weren't for your husband's connections today, you wouldn't have had a chance to dine with me at all. I suggest you go outside and find out. In New York, every woman who has ever rejected me ultimately had no good outcomes. A hint of coldness flashed in his eyes. He said, even if you are a member of the Nathan family, it wouldn't make any difference. Hearing Daniel's threatening words, I just chuckled softly. Daniel, you provoke me time and again. Do you think I'm easy to deal with? Daniel sneered. His gaze looked down on me contemptuously. Yes, I do think you are easy to bully. What can you do to me? As far as I know, you are just a dog raised by the Nathan family. Even your husband looks down on you. Let me make this clear to you. As long as I don't nod today, you can forget about leaving here. I'm very clear-headed today. Otherwise, I would really doubt if I was seeing things wrong. A person who relies on women to rise to power dares to be arrogant in front of me. It seems that over the years of marriage, I have indeed been too low-key. Daniel, I advise you not to be too arrogant in a place like New York. You're just one among many. There are plenty of people stronger than you, especially when talking to me. You need to show some respect. Otherwise, even your wife will be affected. I intended to give some good advice, but some people become arrogant just because they have money. Like this Mr. Daniel sitting next to me. Oh dear, you, a minor character, dare to lecture me. My wife is the chairman of a publicly listed group. Even your husband has to call me Mr. Daniel. What are you even worth? I was just about to speak. Nathan, who had been silent, quickly chimed in with a smile. Mr. Daniel is right. Emily's business is nationwide. She's much better than those who only have looks. It's a blessing that someone like her would notice you. That's your good fortune. Countless women in New York are waiting for Mr. Daniel's favor. I've seen it clearly now. Right now, in Nathan's mind, Daniel is his savior. Did you hear that? Even your husband doesn't care about you anymore. What are you still holding on to? I advise you to agree with me sooner rather than later. I shot him a cold glance. There was contempt in my tone. Mr. Daniel, you might be misunderstanding. I, Olivia, never rely on men. Nathan looked at me, feeling disrespected. His face turned red with anger. He said, Olivia, you have been living in my house for free all these years. Can't you do something for me? If you don't agree today, we will get a divorce. After hearing Nathan's words, I lost the last bit of affection I had for him. It seems he is determined to send me away today. I looked at him calmly. My tone was indifferent. Nathan, are you really going to divorce me for him? Nathan nodded immediately in response. Yes, Olivia, I'll be straightforward. I've never liked you. I initially promised to marry you. Actually, it was unavoidable if it weren't for Mr. Daniel being interested in you. I would have divorced you a long time ago. I sighed. My eyes were filled with disappointment. You have been deceiving me from the beginning, right? Nathan nodded. His gaze held disdain. What else? You don't really think I, the heir of Nathan Group, would be interested in someone like you who only has looks. After listening to Nathan, I thought for a long time. I understood that he really wanted to collaborate with Daniel. I also understood his desire for the company to go public, but I cannot accept him sacrificing me for profit. Unfortunately, He chose the wrong person this time. My identity does not need to bow to anyone, even if the other party's wife is a member of the Johnson family from New York's 4 major families. Since he is heartless towards me, then I don't need to be loyal to him. Hasn't he always wanted the company to go public? Today, I will go against that. Nathan still doesn't know what I'm planning at this moment. Seeing that I'm silent, he thinks I'm afraid. His tone becomes even more reckless. Olivia, hurry up. Don't you see Mr. Daniel is already getting impatient? If you don't take action soon, I'll come myself. He shouted loudly towards the door. Come here. Take this lady to Mr. Daniel's room. With Nathan's command, dozens of security guards wearing Nathan Group badges quickly rushed into the private room. Meanwhile, Daniel has already started to stretch, preparing to make a move. Seeing this scene, I just smiled faintly, seeming completely unconcerned. Nathan, are you planning to force it? Don't forget, I'm still your wife. Doing this, aren't you afraid of being laughed at by your peers? As soon as I finished speaking, Nathan immediately looked up and burst out laughing. He laughed and said, "Ha ha ha, I knew you would say that. Fortunately, I was already prepared." He took out a divorce agreement from his pocket and handed it to me, saying, "Sign here." I stared at him. I asked directly, "This divorce agreement? You must have prepared it long ago." Nathan looked at me nonchalantly. He said, "You are right. Today I brought you here for 2 things. The first thing is to personally hand you over to Mr. Daniel. As for the second thing, well, he hadn't finished speaking. Suddenly, he grinned at me. He was smiling happily. "I've decided to divorce you." I sighed. I slowly lifted my head to look at him. "Since you want to draw a line with me so much, then I will grant your wish." However, I mimicked Nathan's tone. My gaze also became sharper. "I hope you won't regret today's choice in the future." Daniel heard that I agreed to the divorce. His eyes immediately lit up. "Miss Olivia, it's great that you agreed to the divorce. Go ahead. Do you want money or the house? I can give you both." I waved my hand gently. I looked at him coldly. "No need for the money. I think it's dirty. That's all I have to say." I signed the divorce agreement without hesitation. Nathan was surprised to see me so determined. His face showed a look of astonishment. He said, "Olivia, after all, we were once married. Before I leave, I want to give you a piece of advice. In a place like New York, the strong survive. The weak are eliminated. You should serve Mr. Daniel well. Otherwise, your ending will be tragic." I scoffed. I looked at him nonchalantly. Since Nathan cares about me so much, I'll return the sentiment. Mr. Daniel and the forces behind him. They might seem powerful in your eyes, but to me, they are nothing at all. Nathan has been provoking me, yet I haven't confronted him. On the contrary, I've been tolerating him. I'm not afraid of him. I just want to give him a chance to correct himself. But now that things have come to this point, there's no need to hold on any longer. I glanced at the 2 of them and said coldly, "Now you have 2 choices. Either apologize to me or wait for bankruptcy." As soon as I finished speaking, Nathan burst out laughing. "It's just too funny. You know who is sitting across from you? With Mr. Daniel's connections in New York, he could easily deal with you with just a little effort." I smiled at him and said slowly, "Oh, really, in New York? I've never been afraid of anyone. How about we have a little competition later? Let's see whose connections are stronger. How about it?" I see Nathan is still trying to please others. I'm feeling very disappointed inside. Is this the marketplace he talks about? Calling me a vase is fine. Calling me useless is also okay. I can consider him ignorant, but I didn't expect him to ask me to sleep with someone else that I can't tolerate. Because of my special status, I have rarely shown up in public over the years, but I didn't expect. My usually easygoing attitude has become a subject of their mockery. Nathan saw that I didn't react, suddenly pushed me. "Olivia, why are you just standing there? Hurry and go accompany Mr. Daniel." Just then, the door to the private room was suddenly pushed open. A beautifully dressed woman with an air of nobility stormed in, her face full of anger. When Daniel saw this, he immediately stood up. His body was slightly trembling. "Honey, wife, what are you doing here?" Daniel suddenly shouted. Nathan immediately stood up. He stared at Daniel and said, "Daniel, you have quite a nerve." As soon as the woman entered the door, without saying a word, she slapped her. "You bad guy, you're seeing another woman behind my back, right?" Daniel covered his face with his hand. He secretly glanced at his wife. He said softly, "Honey, please don't rush. Let me explain. Things are not what you think." He pointed at Nathan, who was still in shock. "That's him. This man called me here. He said he wanted to talk about a business collaboration. He even specifically had his wife approach me." The woman suddenly turned her head and stared closely at Nathan. Mr. Nathan, is everything my husband said true? Nathan was taken aback. He quickly waved his hand and said, "No, that's not it. It's not true. Go on." He turned his attention back to me. "Emily, right? It's your husband who's attracted to her. She planned today's dinner gathering all by herself." As soon as I saw this scene, I couldn't help but laugh out loud. It's really amusing. You men change your faces faster than you turn the pages of a book. I haven't finished my sentence. The woman was glaring at me with a face full of anger. "Why aren't you answering my question quickly? Did you approach my husband on your own?" She said this while slowly moving closer to me. Saliva splattered all over my face. I looked at her calmly. "Speak. You must be Emily, right? You didn't take care of your own man. Yet you put the blame on others. Have you even looked at how your husband looks? Do you think I would be interested in him?" After hearing what I said, the woman's expression changed immediately. "Stop talking nonsense. I'm asking you whether you seduced my husband or not. It's not for you to comment on him. He is my man, Emily. You don't need to criticize. That's all I have to say." Daniel, who was standing nearby, immediately spoke up in support. "Olivia, what do you mean by that? Do you think I'm not good enough for you? Although I do think that deep down. But to save face for him, I swallowed my words before they came out. I said, "Mr. Daniel, I don't have time to chat with you right now. Since your wife is already here, there's no need for me to stay. Tell your people to leave quickly." I originally thought this was their own business. I shouldn't meddle. But just as I took a few steps, the bodyguard behind me immediately blocked my way. Emily stood in front of me, her face full of anger. "Wait a minute. Before I figure this out, you can't leave." I heard that familiar phrase. I stared at her coldly. "Miss Emily, your husband has already offended me once. Do you want to join in as well?" After hearing my words, Emily was so angry that her face turned pale. "You really have some nerve. Do you know who I am? My last name is Johnson. I belong to the Johnson family, one of the 4 major families in New York. Now you understand, right?" I couldn't help but laugh. "Miss Emily, have you heard a saying? There are heavens beyond the heavens. There are people beyond people. Some people you just can't provoke. I advise you to step aside. Otherwise, I'll deal with you too." As soon as I finished speaking, Emily let out a cold laugh. "What did you just say? You want to teach me a lesson? Let me tell you, in this place called New York, I really haven't encountered a rival. Just a little daughter-in-law from the Nathan family like you. Dealing with you is as easy as dealing with an ant." I rubbed my ears. My eyes were fixed on her. "Miss Emily, it seems you are just like your husband. You still haven't realized whom you've offended. That's all I have to say." I calmly pushed her away. Then I took out my phone and dialed. "Hello, I'm in trouble at the hotel in New York. I need help." After hanging up the phone, I looked up at the clock on the wall. I started silently counting down in my mind. Before I could count to 10, the door to the private room was suddenly kicked open. A middle-aged man in a suit appeared before everyone. Upon seeing this, Emily quickly adjusted her collar. With a big smile, she walked up to him. "This leader. This is my private room. I wonder what brings you here." Before Emily could finish her sentence, the middle-aged man raised his hand to signal her to stop. He walked straight towards me. He asked, "Miss Olivia, I'm not late, am I?" I smiled and waved my hand. "Mr. Thompson, don't worry too much. I'm still fine. No one has figured out what happened yet." The scene was surrounded. "Mr. Thompson, is there some kind of misunderstanding? I'm from the Johnson family in New York. Which unit are you from? Why didn't you say anything before coming?" Mr. Thompson didn't even look at her. His eyes were fixed on me. "Miss Olivia, is this person making you feel uneasy?" I didn't make a sound. I just nodded slightly. Emily was immediately pinned to the ground. She shouted, "I'll tell you one more time. I'm from the Johnson family in New York. Let me go." From the moment I entered until Emily was subdued, the whole process took less than 10 seconds. The other 2 people in the room were completely stunned. One of them couldn't help but ask, "Mr. Daniel, what on earth is going on? He even dares to mess with the Johnsons." "I'm not sure either. According to reason, my wife is quite famous in New York. There shouldn't be anyone who doesn't know her, if it's really as you say. Then there's only one explanation. He completely looks down on the Johnson family." Just after saying that, Nathan looked at me in shock. His eyes were full of disbelief. Emily lost face in front of everyone. She felt very unhappy inside. She glared at me fiercely. "What kind of skill is it to sneakily take action? Do you have the guts to let me make a call?" I slowly squatted down in front of her. I looked at her with a hint of a smile. "All right, since Miss Emily is so confident, Of course, I will give you this opportunity. I took out my phone and handed it over. You have 3 chances, make good use of them. I've seen quite a few stubborn young ladies, but I've never seen anyone as stubborn as Emily. She can't really think that having a bit of money makes her invincible, right? If things were really as simple as she thinks, then wouldn't this world be in chaos? Emily still doesn't know who she's gotten into trouble with. She called directly in front of me. Hello, Michael, this is Emily. I'm in a bit of trouble. Can you help me out? That's right. The location is the New York hotel. Who is the other party? The woman's last name is Olivia. Hello, Michael. Can you hear me? I'm standing just 1 meter away. I can hear the intense sounds coming from the other end of the call. Are you crazy? You dare to mess with someone named Olivia? Are you out of your mind? This line came through on the phone. I laughed so hard I nearly fell over. Emily looked at me in surprise. Then she made a second call. She said, Hello, Mr. Anderson, this is Emily. How have you been lately? Emily chatted casually for about a minute on the phone. Only then did she get to the point. She said, I have a small problem over here. I would like to ask for your help to check on someone. I clearly reported the name, but the other party completely ignores me. What can I do? Who is the other party? She's just an ordinary woman. Her name is Olivia. When she mentioned my name again, the person on the other end immediately hung up the phone. Hey, Emily yelled into the phone, but all that came from the other end was a busy tone. I suppressed a laugh and handed the phone back to her. Miss Emily, you have one last chance. Have you thought about who to contact? Emily looked at me in surprise. Her eyes were filled with disbelief. Someone with the last name Olivia? What exactly do you do? I waved my hand at her. Who I am. Once you finish this last call, you will understand. Emily trembled as she took the phone. She thought for a moment. She pressed a familiar number on her phone. The call just connected. Emily immediately said, Dad, come quickly and save me. I'm at the hotel in New York. There was silence on the other end for a moment. Then a calm voice came through. What exactly happened? You need to explain it to me clearly. Emily gave me a meaningful glance. She began to tell the story slowly. 5 minutes later, we were all silent. Suddenly, a loud noise came from the other end of the phone. Then someone shouted angrily, This is too much. Emily was so startled that she nearly fell. She cautiously asked, Dad, who exactly is that person? I hadn't waited for the other party to speak before I snatched the phone back. Mr. Johnson. Your Johnson family has been quite prominent lately. Hearing me directly call out the name of the head of the Johnson family, Emily and Nathan were both stunned. I just finished speaking. Mr. Johnson's voice rang out, Miss Olivia, please don't be angry. It's all my daughter's fault for being unreasonable. The person opposite hadn't finished speaking yet. I interrupted him directly. 10 minutes. I'll give you only 10 minutes. If you haven't arrived by then, I wouldn't mind seeing one less from the 4 great families of New York. That's all I had to say. I didn't wait for the other party to respond. I hung up the phone directly. Emily saw her father being very respectful towards me. She was so scared that her face turned pale. Immediately after that, with a loud slap, 5 red fingerprints instantly appeared on Daniel's face. He stuttered as he spoke. Old wife, why did you hit me? Daniel covered his face. He said with a look of grievance, and you still ask me why. Emily vented all her previous anger on her husband. Wasn't it you who said that before? Miss Olivia is seducing you. Daniel nodded unconsciously, but seeing his wife's gloomy expression, he quickly shook his head. Honey, things are not as you think. I'm just in the end. Daniel stammered for a long time, but still couldn't explain clearly. Emily saw the situation and immediately realized she had been deceived. With a swift motion, she slapped him again. Daniel's other cheek also received a solid hit in less than a minute. Daniel got 2 slaps. Even he understood what had happened. He immediately knelt down, crying out, Honey, I was wrong. I won't dare next time. Emily turned her face away. Why are you apologizing to me? I'm making you apologize to Miss Olivia. Upon hearing this, Daniel immediately turned to me and kept bowing his head repeatedly. He said, Miss Olivia, it was my fault. You never seduced me from beginning to end. It's my own mistake. He was pleading for mercy while continuously slapping himself. His attitude was particularly sincere, completely different from Mr. Daniel's previous performance. I let out a soft sigh. I waved my hand at him. That's enough. That's enough. Mr. Daniel, please stop. If this continues, your face will be ruined. I was halfway through my sentence, slowly turned my head, looked at Emily beside me. Miss Emily, You wouldn't think that having your husband apologize to me would resolve this matter. Time passed little by little. More and more luxury cars gathered outside the venue. If you observe closely, you will find that these cars have a common feature. They all have New York license plates. The waiter at the door was dazzled. Couldn't help but exclaim, "Oh my God, is there some big shot coming today? Why are there so many luxury cars? Don't even mention the cars. If you just pick anyone from inside the cars, they're all big figures who can stand on their own in New York. What kind of people have come to our private room tonight? It's surprising to see so many big shots at once. Those bigwigs we usually only see on TV. They got out of the cars and headed straight for the private room. The one leading the way is Mr. Johnson, the head of the Johnson family, who just called me 20 minutes ago. Mr. Johnson, when he saw me, he was already sweating heavily on his forehead. I looked down at the time. I nodded in satisfaction. Very good, very good. The timing is just right. Mr. Johnson stood in front of me with a bent posture. He appeared very humble. Miss Olivia, I apologize for what my daughter did earlier. I sincerely apologize. To show our Johnson family's sincerity, I have decided to leave her in your hands. You can hit or scold her as you wish. It's just a matter of your words. I have no objections. Mr. Johnson's words became the final blow to Emily's psychological defenses. In her eyes, her father seems almost omnipotent in New York. But in front of me, he appears so powerless. Dad, what's wrong with you today? I'm your biological daughter. How can you ignore me? Emily doesn't understand. Daniel and Nathan are also surprised. They must be pondering. Why does the head of the Johnson family treat me with such respect and is willing to let me handle his daughter's matters? The reasons behind this, few people know. For businessmen, whoever has money has status. But for me, money is actually the easiest thing to obtain. Mr. Johnson must know some insider information. That's why he rushed over. I stand high above, looking down at Emily. My lips slightly curl up. Weren't you always very interested in my identity? Everyone is almost here now. Let me kindly tell you a little something. I lowered my head. I leaned closer to Emily's ear. I whispered 2 words. Tiangong. As soon as the words were spoken, Emily gasped sharply. Her body stiffened. She collapsed directly onto the ground. She trembled as she raised her hand, pointing at me. Her eyes were filled with fear. You are actually from Tiangong." As soon as those words came out, the whole scene immediately erupted. The people around became more and more lively. Nathan's mood became increasingly chaotic. He looked at me with a pale face. His face was full of regret. At this moment, Mr. Johnson, after understanding the situation, stepped forward. "Miss Olivia, please don't worry. I will definitely give you a satisfactory answer." After saying that, he waved his hand behind him. A few bodyguards immediately understood the meaning. They pulled Emily and Daniel up. Starting today, Daniel will no longer be a part of the Johnson family. Emily was sent back to her hometown overnight. From now on, she is not allowed to come to New York. After dealing with these two, Mr. Johnson cautiously looked at me. "Miss Olivia, do you think my handling of this is acceptable? If you have any other thoughts, feel free to speak up. I will definitely follow Mr. Johnson's orders." I nodded at him and smiled slightly. No wonder the Johnson family has developed so quickly over the years. Mr. Johnson is indeed much more capable than your daughter. Until Mr. Johnson led the group out of the private room, Nathan finally came back to his senses. He stared at me and asked, "Olivia, who exactly are you?" I was just about to speak. An elderly man with white hair stepped out of the crowd. I immediately recognized him as Edward, who proposed to me back then. "You child, please stop talking. Don't you think the trouble you've caused is big enough? I really regret handing the company over to you." Edward's words were decisive. Nathan was stunned as soon as he heard it. After a while, he knelt in front of me, his face full of tears. "Wife, I know I was wrong. It's because I didn't recognize your abilities before. I will hand over the position of chairman to you when I go back. From now on, I will listen to you. Let's start over. Is that okay?" I gave a cold smile and then said, "You mean to say, if I had no backing today, I would be treated as a bargaining chip by you? Is that so?" After saying this, Nathan immediately got anxious. No, that's not what I meant to say." He hadn't finished speaking yet. I stood up. "Nathan, you should thank your dad for arriving in time. Otherwise, you wouldn't be kneeling here talking to me now." Nathan's face was filled with tears of regret. He said softly, "I really know I was wrong. Please give me another chance. I just wanted to go public too much." Nathan spoke at the end. His voice trembled a bit. He said softly, "Olivia, I really regret it. Haven't you always wanted a wedding? We'll have it as soon as we get back. Okay?" He kept pleading and kept bowing deeply. I smiled faintly. I said coldly, "Nathan, it's no use saying anything now. Since the moment you asked me to accompany you to the restaurant, we were already done. In your heart, there is only money and interests. There is no trace of feelings at all." My words pierced his heart like a knife. Nathan lowered his head and stopped talking. Seeing this situation, Edward still wanted to persuade me to stay. I shot him a glare. He immediately shut up. The father and son exchanged a glance. At the same time, they lowered their heads. I picked up the divorce agreement that had already been signed on the table. Without looking back, I walked out of the private room. As for what will happen to Nathan's family in the future, that has nothing to do with me anymore. From now on, Olivia and Nathan will be like strangers. Each will live their own life well.